sabrosura pa' ti que.
Hello, everyone. This is Pam, the Café con Pam, the bilingual podcast that features Latina and people of the global majority who break barriers, change lives, and make the world a better place. Welcome to episode 359 of Café con Pam. Today, we have a conversation with Katia Reguero Lindor. Through her podcast, Katia unravels diverse topics connected to motherhood and parenting, including postpartum depression, working parent guilt, mom guilt, and sustainable parenting, all grounded in her personal experiences and life philosophy. Listeners, this conversation with Katia, bueno, se nos acaba el tiempo porque I had so many preguntas and I really want to bring her back. I think she has a lot to say about so many things, and it was quite fun to explore the various topics that we did. It's all about parenting, great for Mother's Day, as we are dropping this episode on Dia de las Madres de Estados Unidos, and the US is Dia de las Madres. For those of you who are spending time with your mothers, felicidades. For those of you who may be struggling with, maybe you don't have a mother or you've struggled with your mother, I send you so much love. And this is an episode that you may or may not be ready to listen to. We don't talk much about the mother wound, but we do talk about a lot about parenting. So it might also, if you're a parent, if you're a mother, felicidades por todo el trabajo que haces all the time, because motherhood really is a 24/7 job. So really enjoy this conversation with Katia. Y bueno, sin más, here's my conversation with Katia Reguero Lindor. Katia, welcome to Café con Pam. ¿Cómo estás?
Muy bien, gracias. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you for coming. I'm excited to have our chat. So the first question that we always ask is, what is your heritage?
I'm Puerto Rican. So, it's funny because I've never really asked this, and I think of myself as just Puerto Rican, but then living in the States, they're just like, oh, so you're foreign, and it's like, yes, but I'm also American. You know, that's what's the weird, unique thing about Puerto Ricans is that we are both American and also Latinos, and we consider ourselves very prideful in being Puerto Rican, and it's not the same in our mind as being American, and yet it is. So it's very complex.
It's so layered.
Mm-hmm, it is. Yeah.
And it's like that could be a whole podcast.
True. Yes. Let's not go there because we will never finish talking about that.
So born and raised in Puerto Rico, but you went to school in the US?
I went to college in the US. Yes. I grew up in Puerto Rico. I lived there my whole life until, college, and even post-grad, I went back home. And then I moved back to the States when I met and got together with my now husband.
What made you want to come to college to this side? And it was Texas, no?
Yes, it was Texas of all places, even though there's a lot of Latinos in Texas. Yeah, there's a lot of Latinos. I was in San Antonio, so specifically that's...
So it's Mexico, basically?
Yes, it is. It's basically like Mexico. Part two, I met a lot of Mexicans and Mexican Americans in Texas. And I didn't have a notion of where I wanted to go to school growing up. I just knew that I wanted to leave Puerto Rico for at least that period in my life. It's just sort of this thing that I thought growing up, where if I stay here, you know, I'll become like this, my mentality will remain like insular, and I'll never like discover anything new or different. And I guess island life can feel that way, even though I love Puerto Rico and I miss it, and I always want to go back home, and my parents still live there. I have a lot of friends there, and family, but I had this notion that even if just for college, that was a period I wanted to kind of leave the island and see something new.
How was your experience in college, being in such a different place from Puerto Rico?
Yes. I think it made me, like, the grass isn't always greener. It made me realize that, and it made me realize how much I missed home. Obviously, everywhere you go is going to have pros and cons, and if you're always going to compare it, you're going to find, you know, better things and worse things, depending where you're talking about. But um, I came to feel a lot more proud of where I came from, and I missed it more than I thought I would, surprisingly. So surprisingly for me, because I was always like really good, like peace out, I'm out, you know. But then I came to really realize that I love where I'm from. I love my island, and there's really no place like home. So even though I don't live there anymore, that'll always still be home for me.
For sure. And you went back right after.
Yes, I graduated and I went back home. I mean, I wasn't there for very long because I was dating my husband, and at the time I was, but back and forth. I was visiting him. It was still long distance, and then COVID happened, and like that kind of just changed the rest of
Everything.
the trajectory. Yes. So yeah, pregnancy, marriage, all of those things that kind of made me create my own family away from the island.
Was that in your radar to live in the US?
I don't think so. Like I don't think I was opposed to it, but it wasn't like for college where I knew I was going to go to college in the States. It was more of a depend. I always knew that also it would depend who I married, because you know that would be a factor. But something in me always figured I would marry a Puerto Rican, so it was never kind of like outside the realm of possibilities that I would raise my children in Puerto Rico. You know, I was always like, yeah, that might be my life, and I'm okay with that. But you know, I did marry a Puerto Rican, but he lives in the U.S. and he had moved his family over here. So we have his family here in the mainland, and then my family mostly is in Puerto Rico.
Was that hard? A hard decision to decide to be here? Like this is where we're going to plant?
Not really, because he already had his like roots planted here, and I feel like I kind of like married into that, and I knew that from the get-go and I accepted it. So it wasn't really a decision that I like was thinking of, oh, are we going to live here or there? It was more like, oh, you know, I fell in love with this person, we're getting married, and his life is here for many reasons. And I kind of signed up for that. So it kind of came with the territory, and at least it's Florida, so it's pretty close to Puerto Rico.
And the weather también se parece.
Yes, the weather is similar. So in terms of at least distance to Puerto Rico, it's one of the more preferable places that I could live.
Totally. Sí, porque es like 2-hour flight, maybe less.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about 2 hours, 2.5, depending where you're coming from. But my parents live in Aguadilla, and that's the northwest tip of the island, and there's an airport there, and it's an even shorter flight from there than from San Juan.
So it's not super far. And I think the weather makes a difference, because the weather in Texas, for example, like when you say you missed home, I think there's a lot of things why you would.
Yes, I think so. I think this is, other than it being like physically different, and weather-wise, culturally also.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much my culture meant to me and influenced my, I guess, just mi entorno, you know? And so I always loved meeting, you know, people from different parts of the world and learning about their cultures and everything. Um, and it, at the same time, it makes you kind of like miss your, you know, your culture and where you're from, and all the things that you were accustomed to doing, and the people. I think it's like the people, you get used to kind of your people, and it's like your people understand your culture and your customs, and your lingo.
El lenguaje, sí.
Yeah.
For sure. It's like, I love Puerto Rico. I've been to Puerto Rico and it's amazing. And I think, especially for English speaking only people, it's hard to understand that just because you and I are Latinas, it's different. I am Mexican and you're Puerto Rican, and we have different things. We can understand each other, but doesn't, like, not always. There's words that I probably say and you're like, what is that? And there's words that you'll probably say that I'll be like, I'm not sure. Actually, this happened to me when I went to Puerto Rico, porque so we went to the beach, and it was 2 Puerto Ricans, a Cuban, and me, a Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're at the beach, and there's like bugs flying around. And so I'm like, ay, es que este bicho me está like, está todo alrededor. And so they started just laughing, and they were like,
totally
what?
different significance for us.
Yes. And so then they taught and they were like, don't say that. Like,
Yeah.
they were like, first of all, what does that mean? Like, what is in your head? What's happening? And I'm like, the thing that flies, like, don't you see it has wings? And
The
they're like,
insect.
oh my
The
God.
insect. Yeah.
So all those things that are different, we have a lot of similarities, but there's so many differences that you probably
Yeah.
faced when you were in college.
Oh yeah, I feel like I was learning a new language speaking to
Yeah.
Mexicans because the first time I remember my freshman year, there were so many Mexicans and or Tex-Mex, and they were speaking in Spanish and they'd say "mande," and I'm like, "Huh?" They'd be like, I'd be like, "What? I'm sorry. Are we speaking the same language?" And then they have expressions like "la neta, este lo otro," and I'm like, I don't understand what that means. But vice versa. Then I would speak, with my lingo and they'd like crack up. They'd think it was the funniest thing ever. And I was like, well, it's not only reggaeton songs. We speak like that in real life.
Right. It's all the time. Yes.
Yeah.
And really fast as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
For sure. So so you've always played violin.
Yes. I would say now as a mom is the time in my life that I've played the least because of how limited my time is. And not just my time, but like the time that I do try to play, it's like my children are always around me. And so my toddler, she always wants to touch it and she wants to play. And I bought her own little violin to kind of try to avoid this and be like, no, you pick up yours and play. No, she will not let me because then she'll be like, play this song and play this song. And I want to dance to this. And I'm like, I can't practice my scales and like, the things I want to play or practice. And it just feels like I don't get anything really. I feel very rusty. But yes, I started when I was 4. I started lessons when I was 4. And I played all my life, all through college. And then I became a mom. So it's taken a little bit of the back burner in my life recently.
Do you want to pick it back up?
Yes, I definitely want to play more. And I'm thinking, it's just a phase. My kids won't be little forever. So hopefully I'll be able to kind of get back into it eventually.
For sure. Because I know you talk a lot about being a parent and motherhood. And I wonder if, like, where does your being a woman, where does Katia land in that priority list?
Mm-hmm.
And is violin like something that is part of you before you were a mom? And how does that fall into the priority list? Maybe not now because there's chapters, of course.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a good point because I've talked about it before also how striking that balance after becoming a mom and being able to be a whole person outside of motherhood, it's become just a point of a lot of topics I talk about because for me personally, it's been a challenge. I don't do well like leaving my kids and going out to do something. I feel a lot of mom guilt. And so I just don't do it. Like it takes so much kind of pre-planning to even figure out who's going to take over with the kids. And in order for me to, I don't know, have something like, even an hour or two to myself. And it just gets like the days go by and I'm like, I know I need the time for me and I know I need a reset, kind of like a breather, and every mom deserves it and every mom needs that because it's really draining when you're the sole caretaker and you don't have any breaks, right? So it really becomes overwhelming, overstimulating, and when you don't fill your own cup, right, you're not the best version of yourself and you don't give to your kids what you want to give them. You're not the kind of patient, loving mother that you maybe would otherwise be if you had that time to kind of fill your cup and start up again here, right? So I have weekly therapy with my therapist, and I talk about this a lot too, and finding ways that I can, I guess, remove the element of shame and guilt so that I'm able to kind of do these things for me. And it's, I think there's this narrative where it's either you're fully sacrificing your whole life for your children or you're like out at a spa day for like 5 hours. It's like there's definitely a middle ground.
Yes.
And that's sort of where I want to fall, somewhere in that middle ground where I matter as much as my kids. But I want to be able to for it to be sustainable for me, I have to remove the element of shame, because then it's like I'm stressed. Like I could be doing something, but like I'm stressed because I'm
Right.
not with my kids, so that kind of defeats the purpose. I might as well just like be with them and stress with them than like stress without them, right? So it's definitely a learning curve, and it's a process of learning how to fill my own cup and making time for that. And today it could be practicing the violin, and tomorrow it could be like going to the gym, because we all know in the mom world, like really not going to have time to do both as much as I would like. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
10 minutes here, 20 minutes there. But like on a, realistic scale, I would say I would have to pick and choose, okay, today, what do I feel like it's going to fulfill me? And kind of work around that and try to make time for that, but it's hard. So I think Latinos also, it's harder for us to kind of give up the reins with our children. I've noticed culturally there's a difference between Americans and Latinos, and I don't want to generalize because that's not healthy. But the theme I've noticed, is a lot of Latinas are more like me, where they're like, no, I take my kids everywhere, even if I have like the helper come along with me. We're with our kids the whole time. Versus I've noticed a lot of American mothers who I think they feel more comfortable just leaving their kids with a nanny or
Mm-hmm.
family member or babysitter or something, and kind of them going and traveling or doing something. And so I don't know how much of that cultural um, socialization plays into this kind of motherhood I'm experiencing, right? But yeah, that was a lot. I don't know if you want me to dissect any of that.
I have a lot of questions. I'll dissect them. So, yeah, I think the role of the Latina mother is one that's so ingrained in us, and the
Mhm.
expectation of this is what it looks like, this is what it's supposed to be.
Mhm.
And I think context has not been adapted to our times. Like, I think of my grandmother,
Mhm.
who was a stay-at-home mom, and she had 5 children, and she went to cooking lessons, and like she had all the training for like how to be a good wife or whatever. But there weren't the like all of the things that we have nowadays were not there. And so I feel like the expectation has not shifted or adapted to the modern times, you know?
Mhm. And I additional to that, and I agree. Um, I think back in our grandparents' days, there wasn't so much like m- moving around, and so nowadays we're raising children without our village. Back in the day, I think we usually lived fairly close to our family
Mhm.
members and friends, and so you did have a kind of built-in village that we really don't have nowadays, because so many people have moved away from their families and are basically trying to find their own village in new places. That many times the working mom it's just too much. It's not sustainable for women nowadays who also want to be mothers and professionals.
Yeah.
There's like not a space for that to actually be realistically sustainable. And it's equal parts amazing that women have come to a place where like they're aspiring to be more than a housewife. Not that that's any less work, right?
Yeah. It's actually more. It's been proven that it is housework, unpaid housework is a lot.
Exactly. I think that's also the other element. It's unpaid, so it's like it doesn't feel
Mhm.
like society really values the work that goes into being a housewife, quote unquote. And that, for me, that's motherhood. I feel like, it is the hardest job in the world. And yet society doesn't value that. And you see it in every space in society where the mother and child are probably thought of last, right? In restaurants, in airports, in and like most, and I'm talking about this country. I'm sure there's other countries that have done a much better job with this, but my experience, right, is here. And it's kind of crazy. And you take it for granted, or you don't realize it until you become a mom and you're kind of forced to to see these things where you're like, oh wow, so they really didn't give a shit about moms when they thought about this structure or whatever. So yeah, it's really, I think it's right down to society's value that they place, or the lack of value that they place on women who are mothers specifically, so yeah, it's I think our grandparents, having had that village, there was a lot less of that pressure to have to find, caregivers or caretakers, and like I have to go work and I have to make money, but then I also have my kids and this and that. It's a lot. And I think there is a world where these things can coexist for women and mothers, but that's just not how ours is set up right now.
Right. And also, fatherhood has shifted.
Mm-hmm.
You also talk about how there's this element of, it's not just everything to fall on the mom.
Yeah.
Given that you married a Puerto Rican, so also he comes from a Latino culture, did you have conversations around it? How did the expectations happen? Also, he's really busy. So how do you
Yes.
manage the fact that his job requires him to be away and at the same time be like, and I need help from you in this moment when you're here?
Yeah. Yeah, I love talking about this because I think it's also really important to, speak about how important dads are, because honestly, not only for the children, but for a partnership, a relationship. And when you're going through this experience of parenthood together, it's teamwork, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when he's in season, right, he's a professional athlete, so he has his work life is like he has a season where it's totally hectic. He's traveling every other week to games, and so it's, I think, knowing that it's temporary, right? We're like, they retire fairly young in the bigger scheme of life, right? We have an off season, which is wonderful. I'm always like, I love in season. It's exciting, it's tiring, it's exhausting. When we make it into the postseason, it's, so many emotions all at once. But then there's silver lining after every season. It's always like the off season where it's like, okay, we get him at home every day. He doesn't have to leave and travel, So I think when you know there's sort of like an end date to it, and obviously it's going to start up again the next season, but that helps at least mentally, knowing that I can do this. It's just a few more months or just a few more weeks or whatever it is, or a few more years. And additional, when he's home, the expectation, I think, is that, I think it's mutually understood, even though I'll get back to what you asked about the conversation, and we had that prior, right, to kids. But where I was going was that I think it's understood. I've expressed it in many different ways that when he's home, I'm not going to be the default parent at all times, unless, right, there's a specific, right, situation where he's got a meeting, whatever. Even if he's home, obviously those things, I'm a rational person.
Right.
But the understanding has also been that he wants to be that father, right? He wants to be a present father who takes over bath time, who, does bedtime if he can, who changes diapers and gets them dressed and does their little ponytail, gets them ready for ballet. Whatever it is that he's able to be present for, he wants to be actively present for it. Like, not just there, like in the room, like actually taking part in, raising and disciplining and, loving on them and playing with them and enjoying their company. And that's just the kind of person he is. But I remember back before we had kids, before I was pregnant with our first, I did tell him, like, the conversation came, I'm not going into details, but it came from like acquaintances he had that were, not acting in like a way that I was like at all in agreement with.
Parents? They were parents?
Yes. Parents, spouses. Yeah. Parents of kids and they had spouses. And I was just sitting there thinking, there's there's this notion in like the professional athlete world that it's a stereotype that isn't necessarily accurate across the board, right? But it is pretty common, I think, especially with Latinos, and that goes back to the machismo and all of these things, right? But where the expectation is that, yeah, I'm going to have a housewife and I'm going to, do whatever I want while she's at home raising the kids.
Yeah.
And I remember telling him from before I was pregnant and all that, because he'd already expressed to me that he wanted, to get married and have kids and all of that. And I was telling him, I hope you don't expect me to be the housewife that is at home raising our kids while you're out, partying or doing whatever it is that your acquaintances do.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, no, that's not me. And I'm like, I'm glad. I just wanted to reiterate that because
let's make sure.
yeah, I want also for you to know that my expectation in a marriage and a partnership with children is that we're co-parents, that there's not just one parent pulling all of the children, right? Even though, of course, there's also the narrative of like, oh, well, he's out working and, busting his butt, but working. And it's like, yes. And so am I.
You're working just as hard.
Exactly. The fact that I don't get millions of dollars in compensation doesn't retract from the amount of work that love. I do. Oh yeah, I get a few thank yous, but no, honestly, it's one of those things that it's a touchy subject for many people, and I think for society at large, because I'm sure there's all of these like, you have male listeners who think I'm like, oh, that dumb feminist or whatever. It's like, well, somehow money always justifies in people's minds, like, oh, how much value you have. It depends how much you get compensated, monetarily. And it's just like, no, that's not for our family and our nucleus. I am very valuable and I know that. And my kids hopefully one day will know that, even though right now they're in a stage where they don't. But, my husband knows that. And I think it's so important for that to be expressed, for you both to equally be able to say, I appreciate what you do for a family, and what you do for a family makes, my life easier. And he tells me that all the time. What you do for our family makes my life easier and makes me be able to go out and work and do what I do without, the worry, because I know you got it. You're holding down the fort at home and, he's out making the money.
Where did that come from? Did you come from a matriarchal type of home? Did you have a lot of like strong women in your life that you were able to like basically, I don't know if this is how it happened, but the way that I imagined it, it was like you're at a scene and you witness it and you're like, that's not going to make me.
Yeah, I think it's just with the women that I was around. First of all, my mom, the woman who raised me, she's, one of the most incredible women I've ever met. And yet, different times, married, I still see the machismo present unintentionally, right? Probably, like, she has squashed a lot of, I think, generational like passed down machismo in her own way, right? And so she has maybe led and opened the path for me to continue to do that. And yet I still see some things, like I think I was socialized to believe that I had to cater to my husband, not because my mom ever overtly said that. And I don't think she actually believes that. I know she doesn't believe that. But I remember feeling whenever my dad was home from work that we had to like not bother him and sort of like behave so he didn't get upset at us. And like she was cooking like 3 meals a day and like, like, oh my gosh, we need to have dinner ready for him when he gets home from work. And it was just these innuendos that you pick up on, and it's never like expressly said because it wasn't. My mom, I think, is very progressive for her time, and she is a feminist, and she's super open-minded and would never let him dictate, for example, like what she wears or like no, nothing like that. I think it came from also her personality. She's very much, her love language, I think, is acts of service, and she's always like doing things for others. And so I think it's combined of a combination of her personality and her love language, and also, maybe who she married. And my dad has come a long way, but he was definitely raised by very typically Latina mother who didn't let him like even like touch a plate because he was the only boy and he couldn't like wash his own dishes,
Yeah.
So I commend my parents on coming as far as they've come, despite having been raised in that, kind of old school way. So I think I've probably strayed off topic already, like this tangent you asked me about
No, but
my
it's
mom.
good.
And so matriarchs. Yeah, I think I was raised in a matriarchal, yes, despite coming from Latino culture, and there's still being snippets of that definitely in my upbringing. In general, the strong female figures have been present.
I think, and I don't know, I think the majority of Latino households are actually matriarchal. They're just masked with like the macho dad because that's the expectation. Pero adentro in the house, who really runs it is the mom.
Oh yeah.
And this is obviously talking about heterosexual couples.
Right. Yeah. No, I love that you said that because it's true. And I don't think I'd ever like really intellectualized it in that way. But 100%. I think in Latino culture, it's known que la jefa, ella, like
Exact.
usually la jefa, it's the woman, she's the one who like, she's the rule setter. She's the one who disciplines. She's, she has shit under control, and she's the one who holds
Yep.
down the fort, actually, but yeah, it's perceived in this much because we live in a patriarchal society, right? So how else would it be perceived other than like, well, the man is the main breadwinner. In these cases, obviously nowadays that's changing, but many times the men, were and still are the main breadwinners. And we go back to what I said about how the value is placed on who's actually bringing the finances, right? And when that's the man, it's almost as if the woman's work is not even devalued, but ignored altogether many times.
I mean, I think the women in our society are changing that and be like, wait, actually, let me get the credit that I need.
Because... right, that I deserve, that I've worked for.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's take a quick coffee break. Katia, do you drink coffee?
Oh, I do. It's part of my, I don't know if it's the cultural aspect as we've, established Latinos in our culture, but it's one of my favorite things in the morning to share a cup of coffee with my husband. It's also like our like little thing.
I love that. So earlier today, we were talking with my clients about making sure that you have a restorative pause. Because, the conversation about self-care is very much about like self-care. But I feel like self-care could be kind of like sometimes we wait for our tank to be at E to take on self-care.
Yeah.
And so how could we actually get to like halfway, half full tank and take a restorative pause? Like it doesn't have to be, like you go on it like a retreat for a week to restore. Like right. Drinking coffee with your husband could be a great restorative pause.
Yes, I agree. And it's sort of that goes aligned with my frame of reference when it comes to wellness at large, where I take a preventative approach, like you don't want to wait to be sick to like do something about your health, right? You want to prevent it at all costs, right? And that goes for mental health as well. And so yeah, you're touching upon things that are right up my alley of things I love to talk about, because mental health is one of those things that I love to talk about. And it's also become such a like dichotomy for me where I'm like, I preach about mental health and I'm like, my mental health is suffering because I haven't taken me time for the past like 2 months or whatever it is, I try for it not to get to that point, but sometimes it's hard when you have little kids. It just, the days get away from you. The days feel eternal, but the years are like, they fly by. So right. Yeah, before you know it, you've been like 2 weeks without a break and you're like, you can tell because you're like, oof, I need a break.
And your kid is 3 at this point.
My oldest
it's gone so much. The time has gone by so fast and you're like, oh, you grew.
Yeah, you grew and I have a second child and I'm like doing it all over again. I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
So we'll talk about that. But how do you drink your coffee?
I used to drink it black from the Greca, like back in Puerto Rico.
Ooh, better Puerto Rican?
Yes, but my husband has become sort of a barista. It's
Oh,
funny,
we got
he didn't drink
fancy.
coffee. Well, yes, he didn't drink coffee when I first met him. He would like maybe have it gives him, or it used to give him like the jitters. I think he's more sensitive to it, to caffeine in general than I am. I think probably because I've been drinking coffee for like my whole life.
Right.
He didn't drink coffee growing up, right?
Oh,
So
that's interesting.
yes, he didn't. I don't know. Maybe it's because he moved away from Puerto Rico when he was a middle schooler, and maybe that kind of yeah. But anyway, I know that now that he's really into it. But when he's like the kind of person when he gets into something, he's going all in and he's learning everything about it and he's buying the best things for it because he's gonna get good at it. Like he's gonna be basically he became a barista. I'm not even exaggerating when I'm telling you this. And so we acquired a taste for oat milk lattes at first, and then it turned into less milk because I like more a stronger coffee. So we started doing cortados with oat milk.
Mm,
So that's kind of our go-to drink, especially because if we're gonna drink a few coffees throughout the day, we don't want to have too much milk in them.
right.
Yeah, I could do an espresso cortado. I could do a cappuccino. So yeah.
And he makes it for you.
He does. He does. That's also, I think, something that is so meaningful to me. It's something so small, but like, say he has to go to work and I'm not around, he'll leave me the cup of
Mm,
coffee made before he leaves, and to me, that's like so sweet.
yeah, for sure. That's a good restorative pause. I
Yep.
love that.
Yep. Hmm.
What coffee did you have this morning?
I took a flight this morning, so I didn't have my coffee. I had to leave earlier than I'm usually ever awake. So that's the one thing I'm missing from my day today. I really need my coffee.
You've not had coffee today?
Well, I won't lie. The plane did offer some like gringo type coffee, and
Yeah, but you
I
never have
accepted
coffee on
it.
planes. Oh, you did?
Yes, I accepted it, but only because it smelled really good, and I was nursing and I didn't want to fall asleep. And so I was like, let me just smell this coffee. It smells good. Even though it probably doesn't taste very good, but it smells great. So I'll just keep it here in my nose, smelling it.
So you smelled it? I love
Yes.
that.
I smelled it. I took a sip and I was like, this is disgusting, but it smells great. So it's fine.
Yes. I love that. I love that you were just like, I'm getting it for my nose. That's it.
The aroma. Yes.
Nice. Well, I hope you get to drink your coffee for the day. And if not,
Thank you.
tomorrow will be another day. So on my end, it's 2:00 my time.
Mm-hmm.
So I've drank my coffee for the morning. But earlier, right now I'm drinking water, but earlier I had carrot juice with orange juice. So it's kind of like my drink for the day. It's like
Are you
carrot
in
orange juice. I'm in San
Arizona or
Diego.
California? Oh, San Diego. Okay. So you're California. Got it.
Yeah. So West Coast time.
Yes.
And that was really good. And I had my mental clarity lion's mane low pill, for focus.
Right.
And we're chilling, feeling good.
Cool.
And I didn't need any more coffee, which is good. Because I used to get the jitters.
Mm.
I still do get the jitters depending on what coffee I drink. So it's like, you can tell him. When I started drinking mushroom coffee, that's what gave me no jitters.
Oh.
So that helped with the jitters. Yeah.
Well, I've tried mushroom coffee. I'm not sure. I'm not sure he will acquire the taste for that.
It depends. Es que hay de mushroom coffee a mushroom coffee. O sea, no todos están hechos igual.
Of course. Yes. Okay. Well, when we're in San Diego next, you'll tell me your spots, and we'll try your spots.
For sure. I have so many. Sí, porque mushroom coffee, I had a mushroom coffee and it gave me anxiety, so that was not good.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so not all mushroom coffees are created equal. Pero bueno. Okay, let's get back to the show.
Sabrosura pa' ti que qué.
Katia, during the cafecito and right before it, we were talking about motherhood and expectations and all the things. But did you want to be a mom? Was that a thing that you wanted to?
Yeah, it was on my, radar. I'd say that I, at some point in my life, probably would want to become a mom. I think it always in my mind was more, it's kind of like when you think about a wedding, we're like, yeah, I think eventually I want to get married, but it's going to all depend on who I end up marrying, right? So it was sort of like that, where like, I probably want kids, but I'm like waiting to find the right person to even know if that aligns as a, like as a couple. And so it wasn't something that I wanted so badly that I thought that I would do it regardless of having a partner. There's many women who have kids without a partner,
Mm-hmm.
and they really wanted that. And so I don't think I'm, and I don't want to say never, because who knows if I had maybe turned 40 and never found the one. And at that point in my life, I would be like, oh, you know what? I really want kids right now. That might have
Yeah.
changed. I was a fairly young mom. And I'd say for nowadays, for back in our grandparents' time, no, I was probably old, but for the current culture, I was probably a younger mom. I was the first mom of my close circle of friends. So I've definitely like went through it without my close friends having gone through it yet. And I wasn't at a place where I really wanted kids right now. My husband was. He had put in
Mm.
his mind that if he turned 28 and had not met the one, he was going to do it alone without a partner.
Wow. He was ready.
Yeah, he had been wanting to be a dad. I think his 20s were just like, he made it, after he made it professional, he was like, all right, this is one milestone. Now I want a family and I want kids. But if the family part where like I have a partner, it doesn't happen, I still want kids by 28. And I mean, in retrospect, I think he could probably look back and be like, well, I didn't know what the heck I was talking about, because having kids like a lot. And with his lifestyle and job, it's like, bruh, how are you going to
Yeah.
do that? But
Right.
yeah, I mean, he would have figured it out. I think he was counting on, having his village, his support system help him out.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely lucky him, he met me when he was 26. So he didn't have to go that route.
Yes. Before his timeline, like before his
Yes,
milestone
it was right
age.
before. Yeah. He
Nice.
became a dad at like right at 27, 28. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah. So
And how was it for you to be the first mama in your close group circle where like your friends had not experienced it?
yeah, there was a lot of anxiety at the time. Not just because I didn't have friends, like close friends who had experienced it, but because I had this notion that I needed to be a professional before I became a mom, right? I needed to have, gone to law school or whatever it was that I was going to do. And yeah, law school was the trajectory I had in mind prior. So the anxiety, I think, came from that expectation that I had of myself, which I think was very much a societal expectation
Of course.
that I felt. Especially, I come from a very academically high achieving family. So I was definitely the black sheep. I'm the only, I feel like the only woman who didn't have like a higher degree, post college.
Like a graduate degree?
Right, graduate, doctoral, JD, whatever, you name it.
Yeah.
And so the anxiety came from a lot of external nonsense that once I was able to kind of silence that or push it aside, I realized that I wanted this. I was really ready. It was like a very desired child. I felt it was a product of like love and commitment. And it wasn't something that I even had second thoughts about. It just was more of a how do I tell my parents thing. I just was afraid, I guess, of disappointing them, thinking that they had this expectation of me as well. When in reality, parents just want you to be happy and know that you're making decisions that are based on, your heart, your desire, and that you're, you know, doing things, I guess, the right way, like ethically and whatever it is. And that's obviously your moral compass is very personal to you. But I think they knew that I was doing something out of love and that it was a reciprocated thing. It wasn't alone in this, they got to meet him and knew that he was not just like a great guy, but he loved me deeply and would take care of me as well. and I think that goes back to where I had in my mind where like, I don't want to be taken care of, like I want to be an independent woman who can like have her career, and basically I don't need a man in my life to kind of sustain me or whatever. And I think that's where a lot of the shame came in my mind.
Yeah.
And so that's also like a complex, we can dissect that, where I'm like,
Mm,
yes, that is great when that is your reality. And when it's not your reality, that's okay also, because it's not the worst thing in the world to have a man who adores you take care of you and your children, because you're also doing a lot of work for the family. Um,
totally.
so yeah, and I don't discard going back to school someday and getting my degree, like that's not out of the question. It's just where my life turned at the time. It's not what I'm going to do right now.
How did you come to terms with that? And was that like you mentioned that you go to therapy? Was that something that when you and him had the conversation, when you got pregnant, when did it hit you like, oh, this is like the story that maybe was written in your head is not how the story's unfolding?
Yeah, therapy helped me a lot. I didn't find my therapist though till I was like a month postpartum. So that probably would have helped me through my pregnancy a lot, because
Yeah.
also it was like
Yeah.
mid COVID. I was going through so many changes, so many like uncertainties. Um, so I think it was a highly stressful time, and I somehow compartmentalized that stress and anxiety. And so I don't have like the recollection of it being super stressful, but my body reacted to the stress. I was
Mm.
placed on bed rest like halfway through my pregnancy. I was at risk of preterm labor, and it was solely based on like the size of my cervix. Like I had a short cervix, they found. Um, and so that was the reason that I had to be on bed rest, blah, blah, blah. And so my midwives, I had 2 home births, right? That was my first. And my midwives think that it was probably all emotional and stressful,
Yeah.
just anxiety around the whole everything, just being COVID. And so it's funny because I was like, no, it's probably my anatomy, like something's wrong. But then my second pregnancy, I had a totally normal, healthy, uneventful pregnancy where I didn't have that. And I read and I heard and I, looked up a lot of information on it. And it said, yeah, you could either have that in subsequent, pregnancies as well, or not. And
Huh.
in my case, it was not. But the circumstances around my pregnancies were totally different. So that informed a lot, I think, of my body. And I wasn't holding in tension and anxiety and like
Hmm.
stress as much with my second pregnancy. So that made a big difference.
It does make a big difference. I'm a clinical EFT practitioner and I do tapping. I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
have heard of a tap. And in EFT, we often talk about the emotions actually showing up in the body. And so hearing your story is like your cervix contracted, literally, like it shrunk, you know, as the world and the circumstances were unfolding. And so it's fascinating how our bodies won't hide what's happening, and we get signals all the
Yes.
time from like, hey, you need to take care of this.
100%. Yeah, I'm a firm believer that everything internally is somehow, some way going to manifest externally. And that's why your mental health is so important, because that could easily turn into physical ailments if you don't, like worry about your thoughts. If you're having negative thoughts all the time and if you're not taking care of your mental health, it's going to manifest physically at some point. And, you know, um, we have a body, it's our vessel, and we might as well take care of it while we have it and while we can, right? So,
Sí, porque si no, no nos queda más. Oh my gosh, so much and so little time left. So, Katia, tell us about your podcast.
well, it's a parenting podcast. Surprise, surprise. It is called the Unapparent Podcast. It's a play on words on, how there's a lot of unapparent truth of parenting that I try to kind of show and highlight. And yeah, I try to have really authentic and just informative conversations and provide a safe space where other people, other parents or parents to be feel seen and validated, and know that their experiences are, you know, well, while they may feel really isolating, you know, they're not alone. There's a lot of us going through a lot of similarities, despite how many differences may also be present. And so it's a space that it was born in my first postpartum stage, when I was going through postpartum depression, and I really thought that I could benefit from a place like what I've tried to create for others. And it's become like, you know, that passion project for me, where I feel like I'm giving back. I'm now in a place of privilege I never thought I'd be in, thanks to my husband and just his profession. But also, a mom has always told me, and thanks to you being who you are, you know, he's an amazing person who fell in love with an amazing person. And, you know, it's like what you have isn't by chance. And so, you know, I try to, yeah, always keep that in mind, and know that I feel very strongly about, you know, giving. And if you're in a position of privilege where you have a little bit more to give than, you know, maybe your counterparts, it's your responsibility to find ways to give, you know, a little more. And so my podcast is my way of giving to others and giving to myself as well.
Amazing. Tell us where you can find it, all the places and spaces.
So we have Instagram. If you want to follow us on that platform, it's at The Unapparent. You can listen to our episodes on Spotify, iTunes Podcasts, YouTube. We have our visual episodes on YouTube. So basically everywhere you listen to your podcast, you can find ours.
Y en inglés y en español, ¿no?
Yes, it's a bilingual podcast. So we try to release one, like every other episode is in a different language.
Uno y uno,
so.
Nice.
Yeah.
O sea, hay hambre para contenido en español.
Sí, estoy de acuerdo. Y yo pienso que, aunque tengo muchos más seguidores que quizás hablan solamente inglés o que sean bilingües, la comunidad latina que solamente habla español tienden a ser los que están más como engaged. Y porque creo que hay la falta de este tipo de contenido en espacios latinos. Entonces, se me hizo bien importante, pues notar eso y hacer algo al respecto y ofrecerle el mismo tipo de contenido a esa comunidad latina que quizás no se puede beneficiar del contenido en inglés.
Sí, estoy de acuerdo. Y sí, tengo toda la razón con que en español, es que sí, justo precisamente, no voy a repetir lo que dijiste porque es justo eso, que igual porque no hay tanto, entonces dicen, pues de aquí me agarro. Okay, Katia, last few questions. Do you have a remedio that you want to share?
It's the go-to in my family. Like, I remember my grandma always saying, like, if she would hear me having a cough or something, she'd be like, oh, tea with honey and lemon. And my uncle, one time I was sick, and I was at his house, and he prepared me literally the same, like, tea with honey and lemon. And I realized it's something that's like being passed down, because I do that for myself
with your
and now I'm going to probably do that with my kids too. So yeah, typically ginger tea is my go-to, and limón y miel, like a spoonful of honey, and yeah.
For sure. Y aparte siento que esos tés era como que, let me just go to the yard and like pluck some things.
Yeah, some herbs or something.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have a quote or mantra that you live by?
So I saw a quote recently that, I guess, you know, we all go through different phases. So maybe if you ask me again in a year or two, there might be a different one. But where I'm at right now in this whole conversation of like feeling like a whole person within motherhood and all of these like complexities, I read something that I really loved, and I'll share it with you now. It says, and just like the moon, you shall go through phases of light, of dark, and of everything in between. And though you may not always appear with the same brightness, you're always, always whole.
I love it so much.
Yeah, I like that a lot too.
And two more. Do you have a productivity tip, trick, or tool that you want to share?
I need all the productivity tips and tools because my ADHD brain doesn't compute well when it comes to organization. So I don't think I'm the right person to give any advice when it comes to organization, to be honest. So don't ask me, but share all of your tips.
How do you do it?
How do I do it? Yeah, I have to set reminders for myself all the time because my mom was always like, write it down in a calendar. And I'm like, oh, that doesn't work for me because I forget to look at my calendar. So like, no, your ways, amazing. They work great for you. They don't work for me.
Yes.
So I have to like remember to set alarms for myself for certain things. A lot of it lives up here. I like have too much probably faith in like my memory. But I know that there's times when I'm going to forget things. So I definitely have to like set reminders for myself.
So a phone, your phone is your tool. That's a tool.
Yes, I hate to admit that because you know how like this whole, oh, your phone is like a part of you and it shouldn't be about technology, but it helps. It's my calendar will not
Yeah.
ding at me and remind me of things I have to do. So
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do. Just like your
yeah,
parents did what they could with what they had. It's all good.
right. Mhm.
And the last question that I think I'm going to implement, you're the first guest that I asked this,
Ooh.
is for mental health, what is your restorative pause?
Hmm. It used to be like going to the beach, working out. That was really, really good for my mental health. And nowadays in this, mom life realm, um, while those things would give me a lot of peace and restorative pause, it's not realistic for me anymore. So, a cup of coffee with my husband, or it doesn't have to be an elaborate date night, just some adult conversation one on one where we can kind of be open and vulnerable and talk and laugh and just have that connection. That connection really fills my cup because I'm all day with little kids and it's like not a lot of adult conversations. And equally, if my husband's not around, that with a good amiga, a good friend, that will also fill my cup. When we talk about mom life or whatever it is, some like really meaningful conversations, or a really good book.
Yeah, for sure. For
Something like
sure.
that. That'll be my restorative pause.
I like that. And very last one, what would you, for non-parents, what would you like to receive as support?
For non-parents, as in from
Like
non-parents,
you as a
or
parent, yeah, from non-parents to parents. What do parents want to tell non-parents, basically? How could we support parents?
got it. That's a good question, and I will give you an answer. Let me just think on this a moment. Um, I guess thinking back to before I was a parent and how like little I knew of the needs, like it's sadly but interestingly surprising to me every time I get questions about, like um I know something to do with my world of parenting because I'm like, people don't usually think about that, right? So I don't know, like if you see them, this is like a really general, but I used to do this. I used to like judge, other parents or moms specifically when like I would see their kids having a fit, or I would get on a plane and see kids and I'd be like, oh God, this is gonna be a long flight. Well, I think having a little more compassion, a lot more compassion for mothers in general is something that it just touches us so deeply
Mhm.
when we come across people in public spaces that are compassionate and you see that we're struggling. Trust me, if you are having a bad time listening to our kids crying, we are having 10 times worse of a time with them crying. And it's not a sign of bad parenting if kids are crying. Kids cry, babies cry. It is normal. It's natural. It is very inconvenient for people around us. And yet, your convenience is not more important than the person next to you, right? So if you see us struggling, just be kind and maybe offer to lend a hand. And especially if they're alone, they're very overwhelmed. I can assure you of that.
Yeah,
And overstimulated and touched out and all of those things. But yeah, we sometimes just need kind words and maybe a helping hand.
for sure. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much for coming to Café con Pab. This was great. I still have so many questions, but we're out of time. So maybe, I don't know, we'll bring you back another day. So much more to
Yes, and
talk
I'll come. I
about.
have an actual cafecito with you next time, and I'm in San Diego.
Yes. Awesome. Yeah, please do. That would be awesome.
Sabrosura pa' ti que.
Okay, listeners, that was my conversation with Katia. I would love to know what resonated with the episode. What really was the nugget that you tuned in and you were like, "Oh, that's cool." Screenshot that. Tag us on the socials. I I recently shared that I'm working on my capacity to share on socials. So, I'm not on there that much, but I'm on there. And so, please do tag us. Katia's information is in the episode notes, and so definitely tag us and follow us at Café con Pan Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, Café con Pan Pod on TikTok. I forgot about that one actually. I haven't posted in a minute. Cafecompam.com is the place where you can find all of the episode notes, prior episode notes, all of the things. We would love for you to stay connected. So if you also want to be the first to know when new episodes drop, we do send you an email when that happens. You can sign up in there in cafecompam.com and be the first to know when this happens. Y bueno, listeners, thank you so, so much for being here today. Y como siempre, stay shining.
Sabrosura pa' ti que.